It's been 15 weeks since the United States authorized the first COVID-19 vaccine. Over that time, what have we learned about potential side effects? We'll explore that on this episode of Shareable Science Beyond the Blog. Welcome to Shareable Science. Science you can share. There are two data sets that we can use to look at to explore side effects associated with COVID-19 vaccines. The first are the actual patients that were enrolled in the clinical trials that themselves received doses of vaccine. That data is up here for the 3 vaccines that have been approved for emergency use authorization in the United States. Either the very early stage, phase 1 or 2, or the more later stage, primarily phase 3. So altogether, that's about 58,000 individuals that received at least 1 dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. The clinical parameters around this and the follow-up to the individuals that were vaccinated was very tightly regulated, and it was a very active process of gathering that type of feedback. And that led to 2 sets of side effects. Common side effects, and you've heard me talk about these. That includes things like pain at the injection site and fever and muscle aches and chills. That's, somewhere 50% or less of the vaccinated population. Generally, stronger sets of side effects with the second dose for the 2-dose vaccines than with the first dose. Generally appearing within the first 12 to 18 hours and then disappearing within about 24 more hours. There was a set of rarer, more serious side effects that were identified by the FDA that they felt were worth keeping a closer eye on. Swollen lymph nodes, temporary facial weakness, also called Bell's palsy, and with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, a potential blood clotting anomaly. The challenge with these rarer effects was that they were not seen at a significantly different frequency than what you would expect just in the general population. So it was difficult at that point to tell if this was something that you would actually see once you began to roll the vaccine out to larger numbers of people. And that's the second set of data that we can look at. So in the United States, as of the 29th of March, 145.7 million doses of these 3 vaccines have been administered, and you can see the breakdown below that number. That means 95 million Americans have received at least 1 dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Those are numbers that you now can begin to gather additional information. And these same kinds of follow-on studies are taking place in countries all around the world, looking for the rarer side effects that you wouldn't necessarily see in that smaller population. And we've seen how that system actually works. So within the first few weeks of vaccination, we had reports of rare cases of anaphylaxis, these extreme allergic reactions that you could treat in some cases with an EpiPen, in other cases with hospitalization. The CDC in their most recent set of data actually says that this looks like it happens between 2 and 5 cases per million vaccinations. So rare, something that you wouldn't have necessarily seen with those smaller clinical trial data. You're also seeing the same thing begin to play out with the AstraZeneca vaccine. Now that hasn't been brought to the FDA for emergency use authorization in the United States, so this is data that's based on other countries. But there's this question about whether this rare blood clotting, low platelet disorder is actually caused by the AstraZeneca vaccine and what that population might be. So we're still gathering data on that. So if you're watching this video a few months in the future, maybe you're watching this in like June, you already know that answer, but the rest of us will have to wait for more data. But those are the kinds of rare, serious effects that you would not expect to see until you rolled them out to millions of people. In the United States, there are 2 ways that the CDC and the FDA track side effects related to vaccine. The first is called vSafe. That's a smartphone app. So you have to have a smartphone for this to work, and you have to actively register to participate. And this is the site that you would go to in your smartphone, and then it will send you periodic health check-ins asking about any symptoms that you might have. The second approach is a website called VEERS, a data repository. And here's the website for that. or you can also speak to somebody and submit a report through the 1-800 number, or you can reach out to them through email. This is a place that anyone can submit a response, an adverse response. A patient, a caregiver, a family member, or a healthcare provider. In fact, healthcare providers are required to submit serious health complications from the COVID-19 vaccine. Things like hospitalization or significant illness or death. So they're required to submit that to VAERS. VAERS is a passive system, though, so it doesn't actively capture everything. It only can work with what's been entered into the system. And as a general rule, there's a lot of information in VAERS, and it's difficult to tell if what you see is actually just merely associated because it occurred at the same time or is actually causative. And here's a case in point. So every Friday, the CDC releases the most recent round of VAERS data. And from the release from the 22nd of March, at that point, there'd been 126 million vaccines. And among the findings in VAERS were 2,216 reports of death from individuals that at some point in the recent past had received a COVID-19 vaccine. Now, some groups picked up on that and said, oh, there are 2,216 individuals that died after receiving a COVID-19 vaccine. The assumption of that being that the COVID vaccine is what caused their death. That is not at all what having that in VAERS means. There are 8,000 Americans that die every day, and by chance, by likelihood, some of them would have received a COVID-19 vaccine. You have to do additional levels of data searching and study before you can say that the vaccine actually is causative in death. And so that's what the CDC does. They go back through, they contact those healthcare providers, they look at health records, they look at death certificates, and then try to determine, is there any kind of connection? And in their most recent report, they've said that they don't see any evidence that the vaccine was implicated in these deaths. Now, does that mean that the vaccine is free and clear and doesn't cause any serious side effects? No, that's not what that means. All medications have complications and side effects. But we are not seeing 2,200 individuals dying because they got the vaccine. So I just want you to put that number into context. And that now brings us to the last piece of information is, what about the long-term effects? What happens a year after you've received the vaccine, 2 years after you've received the vaccine? I have a really unsatisfying answer for that. We don't yet know. The first individuals who got the vaccine as part of a phase 1 clinical trial, that was a year ago. Large-scale studies enrolling tens of thousands of individuals didn't happen until last summer. And the people that are now getting it in the public, that didn't happen until the second half of December. So we have to wait to gather more data. But I can tell you this, from other vaccines throughout history, generally, if there are serious side effects, those have happened, and they happen very rarely, but they've happened within the first 2 months. You see effects happening early on, within the first couple of days, within the first week, and then sometimes you see something at, as far out as 2 months. But that's very, very rarely. So given that, based on a history of other vaccines, we don't expect that we would see a lot of long-term effects. Now, we just need to gather more data, and I know that that is a dissatisfying response, but that's where we stand. All right, I hope that this was useful as you think about vaccines and side effects and the benefit and the risk of taking them. I want you to be informed as you make those decisions. Vaccines are now available to a larger percentage of the American population. We see that they have benefit. They reduce the risk of getting seriously ill, and the data are telling us they reduce the risk of us transmitting the virus if we get exposed. But I want you to have that other piece of the coin, the other data, what we know about side effects as well. Please share this with others that you think might find this useful. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode of Shareable Science Beyond the Blog.